For those of you that came in a little bit later, my name is Shaylin or Shay, and I am one of our EF Gap Year consultants here. So I am going to be leading this panel today, which I'm really excited about. And we're also joined today by three of our fantastic alumni parents. So we have Susan, Denise, and Mary. So their students went on our GAP programs, and this parent panel will be a Q&A style, so all about the gap year experience from pre-departure, on program to return. And we'll talk about things like gap year perceptions and how their students were impacted by the experiences that they had on program. So before we dive into this discussion, I want to give you all some context on just who we are at EF and a little bit about our programs, just to lay a foundation for you as we go through the Q&A portion of our presentation here today. So to begin, I want to just tell you a little bit about EF and who we are. So simply put, EF is really the world leader in educational travel. So we've been around for close to 60 years, which is pretty wild. And we've helped millions of people see new places, experiences, new cultures, learn new languages, and discover more about themselves and the world. So as you might imagine, this deep expertise and experience running educational travel programs for so many decades has been incredibly valuable as we navigate just the ever-changing world and landscape and prepare our students that attend programs to be able to take on the world here. So we are also an educational partner. We work with thousands of high schools and colleges in the US. That's actually what I was doing for EF before I started working on our GAP programs, was working with high school and middle schools all across the country. So what we like to think of is that we are globally local. So I'm actually one of over 50,000 employees that are staffed in over 100 different countries all over the world. And basically what that means is that, we know what's happening on the ground everywhere we travel, because we ourselves live and work in most of those places as well, which is really a unique thing about our organization. So in addition to the support that this global footprint allows us to provide, we also end up with a really unique perspective where we can see firsthand at a massive scale the impact that our programs are really having on our communities and on our students, and also the shifting educational landscape in front of us as well. Okay, hopping on to the next slide here. Oh, what's happened? There we go. Okay. So where education meets exploration. I love this. So learning can occur anywhere, right? So this is really why we built these programs. A lot of the times I get these questions with families of, well, how did this all begin? So at EF, we really understand that, kind of probably like a lot of you do, that learning doesn't necessarily have to take place in the classroom. And we're learning now more than ever that real growth and learning can happen anywhere. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen within the four walls of a university or a college campus. And that's essentially why we started these GAP programs. And with a whole philosophy in mind of our programs are designed to help students thrive in an ever-changing world. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the space and the tools and the experience and of course the confidence to take on the world and feel like they can do what they set their mind to. So we want to get them out of their comfort zones. We want to allow them to discover more about themselves, the world, and themselves in the world is usually how we put it. And we want them to come home really equipped to take on whatever's next, whether that's traveling or college or a job or whatever it may be. So now what I want to do is I want to share a little bit about our programs and how they're structured. Like I said, just to give you some framework as we're walking through this panel today. So when it comes to EF Gap Year, we offer Gap Year programs for anyone ages 18 to 22. So whether you're looking to take a gap year between high school and college, during your college experience, or after college, we have different options that work for everyone. So we have our short-term programs, which are 4 weeks long. We have our gap semester programs, which are 10 weeks long, and they're kind of mimic like a semester that you'd have at a university. So they would happen in either the fall or the spring. And then we have our full gap year program, which begins each fall, and it looks a lot like a typical academic semester or an academic year with 2 semesters and a winter break. So 4 weeks, 10 weeks, and 25 weeks. And as far as what's included with those programs, keep in mind as we go that regardless of which program you choose, this is what would be included in that program. And I do want to zoom in in a little bit on those last two for a moment, the global support and the mentorship piece. So from this moment right now all the way through until when your students are out on the road on program, you're going to have a whole team of amazing people around you at all times. So you'll of course have the cohort of students that you're traveling with, and these are your people, right? You're going to create amazing memories with them, lifelong friendships, even after the program ends. But you'll also have your tour directors, your field directors, local guides, as well as program advisors and student life coordinators helping to support you throughout the program, both for great experiences and the highs and the lows. So I know we were talking a little bit too beforehand with some other parents as well, of just kind of memories from advisors that they've worked with, and it's kind of cool how folks sometimes stay in touch too. So now I want to quickly go through our program options just for some context. I'll be kind of brief here. If things like these spark your interest, I encourage you to attend one of our webinars that goes through all of our programs, which we host on Thursday nights. We actually have one tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, but I'm going to give you just a quick overview of what this looks like. So our short-term programs, they're all around 4 weeks long. They happen in various countries and at different times throughout the year, but this can be a perfect option if you want something that is going to fit within your school calendar. So you're not looking to take any time off, like you are looking to travel during a spring break or something along those lines. And we currently have options for short-term 4-week programs. For our European Discovery opportunity, that program takes us through 4 major European countries. It gives a breadth of knowledge across a bunch of different subjects and places, and is just a really great kind of like sample platter of countries that you can travel to. We also have our Sustainable Development in Costa Rica program. That gives you a chance to work hands-on with different local nonprofits and focuses on environmental sustainability. And if students are looking for more of an academic focus, we also have our global business in London, and that you would actually attend business classes at our international business school, HALT, which, fun fact, my fiance actually graduated from, but that's another story for another time. Then we have our semester-long programs. So these are our 10-week-long programs. They're built around an academic semester. They have departures in September, and they also have departures in February. These are going to be great for students that are looking to defer graduating early. Maybe they just want to take a break before, during, or after their college experience. And while our panelists today can, speak to that sort of pre-college gap experience, we're seeing, and I'm personally seeing, a lot more families that are reaching out with students that are wanting to actually take a break during college. So, if you're in that boat, you're certainly not alone. And we have 5 really amazing programs that we offer within those 10-week opportunities. Our semesters options vary by location, structure, level of independence. So tonight we're going to hear from Denise about the Changemaker program, which is service and sustainability focused. And then we're also going to hear from Susan about Graydon's semester, in which he studied Spanish and he had an internship in Dublin. So we're going to hear about those experiences. And if, again, if more of these catch your eye, you can certainly chat about these with your gap year consultant. And then last but not least, we've got the, sort of the queen here, the gap year program. The 25-week full gap year program is probably our most popular program, because you are able to combine travel, language immersion, service work, and internships, and you do so alongside your cohort. So this option is definitely the most customizable. So, if you want to learn French in Nice and then go to Thailand for service and internship in Stockholm, you can kind of make it what you want it to be. And this is usually the program where, if you're looking to take that full year off of school or before school, this is typically what we find that most families will do. So obviously that was a very quick run through of our offerings, but hopefully you're all feeling inspired and energized by all of this. And we're not going to go too into depth into the pricing and planning tonight, since we want to switch over to our conversation with our parents. But the best next step after this panel is to just connect with your gap year consultant or join us for one of our webinar sessions so that we can dig a little bit more into these details. So with that, I want to bring it back to our fabulous parents, Denise, Susan, and Mary, who have joined us all here tonight. So if you want to come back on camera, which it looks like you all have already, I love it. And I'm going to go around and I just would love to introduce all of you into the conversation. And we're going to actually start off, let's see. Oh, okay, perfect. We're going to start off with you, Susan, if that's all right. Oh, whoopsies.
Yeah.
Going back.
Or
One
maybe
second. We're gonna start with Susan. I don't know what just happened here. Sometimes I feel like the PowerPoint, sometimes things get a little wonky, but we're gonna start off with you, Susan. Susan is the mother of Graydon, and he went on one of our spring semesters back in 2019. So Susan, if you want to pop off mute, and I would love to hear where you're coming from and hear a little bit about the initial experience of what it was like when Gray brought this idea to you and how that whole process began.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in Boston. We're right outside of Boston on the South Shore. And Gray, when he was a senior in high school, I think, as I said before, he came to us about a week before graduation, and basically said that he didn't think that he was ready for college yet. He felt like there was more out there in the world for him to explore. Didn't know what he wanted to do. Didn't feel like he sort of found his his self-footing yet. And, was hearing a lot of kids getting very excited about going to college and partying and this and that and all the freedoms they were going to have. And he just felt like that wasn't exciting him. So we went into fire drill mode and sort of, I researched a whole bunch of different programs and landed on the EF program. He worked for first semester. We had required him to be enrolled in a college and defer that admission for the year before he went off onto his gap year. And my husband's very traditional and wanted to make sure he was going to go to college. So we did that, and he did the semester he worked for first semester and then left for the gap year, his second semester.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
Okay, so now we're going to pass it off over to Mary. Mary is the mother of Jasmine, and Jasmine did our full gap year program. She actually just finished up. So Mary, same question. Would love to hear where you're calling from and a little bit about that initial experience of, Jasmine bringing this idea to you and what that felt like and how it all came to be.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary in San Francisco, and Jazz started talking to us about a gap year pretty early on. She'd always liked the idea of Peace Corps service. We do a lot of service work ourselves just as a family and through National Charity League and through Girl Scouts and all that kind of good stuff. So she was always already sort of predisposed a little bit to this. Plus, you can probably tell from my accent, our family is from Europe. So she's done quite a lot of travel in Europe, just going back to see family. But it was really in junior year that she came to us and said, I would like to take a gap year. I don't know what that looks like. And so we started talking about that, and she definitely took on researching that, because both my husband and I were very supportive of a gap year, but we very much were like, but that doesn't mean being at home for a year. That means like going off and exploring the world in a traditional sort of gap year fashion, which she was completely up for. So she looked at a number of different programs and then found the EF gap year program. And so that's what she came to us with, and we supported that. And I had lots of questions, as I'm sure you all do tonight on this call, but I think we're going to probably get into them. But yeah, that's how it started.
Great, thank you so much, Mary. And now we're going to pass it off over to Denise. So Denise, I would love to hear a little bit about Sora's story, and same question, where you're coming from, and just to dive a little bit more into the same experience of what that was like when this all came to be for Sora.
Yeah, great. Hi, thank you, and welcome everyone. I remember sitting in your shoes, and that's the thing. So I was so excited to be able to share a bit about our experience. My daughter Sora it was probably end of sophomore, early junior year. Things were a little bit more personal where she was struggling in high school with girl drama. And it was really tough for her. And someone had talked about, she met someone who had graduated early and she said, Mom, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to graduate early. I'm going to graduate in December of my senior year. And so she set her mind to it, took extra classes online, so the full class load plus some summer, so that way she could also have all the classes she needed. She had her eyes on going to university in California. So she indeed accomplished that. And we had been to Costa Rica. We're a very international family. My husband's Korean, I'm Chilena. And so, we love exploring the world. And when we were in Costa Rica, something struck her. And she said, Mom, when I graduate, I'm going to move to Costa Rica and volunteer, which I thought was awesome, very commendable. Then I thought, she's a young 18-year-old on her own. I just pictured her hopping on mopeds because she has a very free spirit and like zipping off, and it freaked me out. So, so we knew she was going to travel after graduating in December and do something, giving back. And so by doing some research, I came to her and I said, Sora, look at this program. And initially, it was supposed to be Peru, but then there was a political unrest. So EF had an alternative, which was awesome, in Dominican Republic. But when we were looking at everything and the countries, she was like, Mom, this is the dream list, because we were saying, we want to go to Machu Picchu, we want to go back to Costa Rica. And so she was, and Galapagos. And so when I brought this to her attention, she was like, absolutely, this is what I want to do. And the fact it was with young adults, 18 to 22. So kind of like her people, right? Others that want to explore. The fact that it was somewhat structured and somewhat freedom, and just knowing that there was that additional oversight. When you showed Shaylin the list of people that are with the students, you feel them, and they are awesome people. They're not like the traditional chaperones. So I would talk about their country leader in Costa Rica, how awesome he was, and then in Panama, and like they really enjoy having the kids explore. So that was one thing, and you may all be sitting there going, okay, looking at the cost associated, easier for some, more difficult for others. And I was like, okay, this is an investment. But then I remember thinking to myself, if someone told me she could either go to Costa Rica, very inexpensively and not having the safety protocol, and if someone said it's, this amount of money for much more higher guarantee of her safety, is it worth it? And a richer experience, more guided. And I was like, without a doubt, and that's what changed, and hit me. So that's, if anyone's sitting there going, gosh, is it worth it? 110% it is. And like Sora was saying, she saw more of the countries and the true culture than she would if she were to go on her own or traveling with her family.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point too, where it's, there's always going to be these are of course investments that we make in our for students. And there's always an option that's less expensive, but there is that whole piece with the safety side of things that I think really sets our programs apart from, if you were to just do something like this on your own. Well, I'm happy everyone has been introduced. I'm going to actually go ahead and stop sharing just so we can see everyone's faces here. And we're just going to kind of dive into a few more questions as we go. So I would love to, I know, Susan, you had mentioned something about your husband being a little bit more traditional and maybe having a little bit of a harder time with the whole idea of something like this for Gray. And I would love to ask you that question around, what were maybe some different perceptions that maybe your husband had or other people had about taking a gap year, a gap program, and how you kind of handle that and approach that.
Yeah, it was, to be honest with you, 2019 here in our town, I didn't know anyone that had taken a gap year. It was very new to me, and to our family in general. So when Gray I think Mary, or maybe Mary or Denise were saying that, I don't want you sitting in the house doing nothing for a semester. You have to go do something. That was sort of my husband's fear, was that, there would be a lot of Xbox playing, and, it would be just a sort of a rest for a semester or a year. So it was definitely like challenging to get our head around it, and just to feel confident that we were making the right decisions as parents, to say, okay, we're going to pause on this college experience and give him this opportunity. And not knowing anyone that had done this before me in our town, it was definitely challenging. I did end up just word of mouth finding a couple more people that had different experiences with different programs. And my husband eventually got on board when I sort of, I think the great thing about EF is that it felt very organized, and it felt very secure, and it felt very purposeful. So I was able to get that information, and after meeting with someone at EF and talking about that, and sort of, I hate to say it, but sort of present it to my husband as a good option that was going to be workable. So it did feel comfortable to him. And Graydon was really pushing for something structured. He was super nervous about it, though. I mean, it wasn't, he was nervous to do it. There was a lot of sort of cold feet going back and forth. I want to do it, but I'm nervous. I want to do it, but I'm, because he just didn't know what to expect. So it was sort of his first foray into any international travel. He was an athlete in school, and any vacation we had was tied to that. So it was a little hesitation. Everyone was hesitant, but we did get on board after talking to EF and getting a really purposeful plan in place.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So it sounds like some of the things I'm hearing, like, I love what you just said about purposeful plan and just having a lot of intention behind what your plan was for Grayson, and feeling like you had all of the information that you needed. Mary, Denise, anything to add to that? Did you run into anything along those lines where you felt like something helped you with just feeling a little bit more confident, or being able to, share with other people that maybe had doubts about, something like this that's a little bit more non-traditional, and kind of helping them to feel excited about, them doing something different?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't any hesitation from Jasmine's perspective. Like she was like off to the races, and this is what she wanted to do. Similarly, I think, Susan, you had said earlier that one of the requirements was that Gray had applied to college and had deferred for a year. We also had that rule, like, go through in your senior year, go through the application process, decide on your college, check that your college actually does take a deferral, because not all colleges do, right? And then defer. So that was one of our rules as well. And then the structure of the program was what obviously made myself and my husband comfortable, but it has enough flexibility in it that the kid feels like they're curating their experience themselves, right? So they get to choose, well, especially in the gap year specifically, they get to choose, of the 3 modules, where they want to go for language immersion, where they want to do their service project work, and where they want to do their internship. And then for the stuff in between, the traveling in between, that was comforting to me, because that's where, sort of, if things are going to go wrong, it's between the modules, right? And so there was a lot of structure and programming around that. So there was the touring and the culture piece of it that the gap year provides, which, if you leave a teenager to their own, they're not going to necessarily take advantage of all those cultural experiences that you would want them to do while they're in that space, right? So that was also something that was, important to me. They're not always going to choose, to go see the church or the cathedral or whatever when they should be in that moment, right? So that was provided by the program, but there was plenty of free time still within there that they could go off and focus on whatever they wanted to focus on. So
yeah. So kind of having that blend between some independence, some flexibility, but also some structure. And I think that's what makes our programs really special, right? Is that we provide a level of structure that is almost kind of like a gateway into that independence, and doing that in a very natural way. Denise, anything else that you'd add to that whole theme of perceptions from other people, or anything like that was helpful for you?
No, really minimal hesitation on our end, because, Sora had already completed everything around graduating early, applying to colleges she knew she wanted to go in the fall. So really looked at this as a true gift that she was able to do this, and then kind of timing wise, keep with what she originally had planned. She's very planful. Another benefit that I saw with her doing this program before going to college, it drives me crazy. So many universities are asking kids to declare their major on the front end, their freshman year, which is ridiculous in my point of view. And so I shared with Sora, use this time to really dig in and explore and get to know yourself. So as you're going into college, to see, are there areas of interest that you had never thought about? And so when you go to school, you could maybe go into things looking a little bit differently. And so, and then I live in an area where, it was nothing but high fives from parents saying, cool, go for it. We can't wait to hear. And, she started a personal Instagram account, to her travel Instagram account. And she's like, I made EF thousands of dollars, because people were asking her, and she was like, and my friend, actually one of my good friends, she's like, do you know Sora is inspiring other kids to do this and take gap semesters? And she said, heard her daughter and friend talking about it, saying, did you see this? And we should do that, so it's very little hesitation and zero regrets.
Yeah. I love that. And tell her thanks for getting that Instagram going. But no, I mean, I think I love what you said about the high fives, because sometimes we assume that we have to do things a certain way, especially at that kind of big moment in students' lives when they have to make these big decisions. And it's really inspiring to see that people are doing things that are different and that there are other options out there. And I love that you touched on that. Susan, there was something that you had mentioned about Grayson that I wanted to ask you about, because something that I hear a lot from families that I work with is a little bit about that sort of, nervousness, anxiety. It's kind of like with anything where when you decide you're about to do something really big, it can bring a lot of emotions, and it can, even if you're excited, sometimes it can feel like, am I making the right choice? I'd love to hear a little bit, if you're open to sharing, about that experience with Grayson and, maybe some cold feet he had.
Yeah, he definitely, there was definitely anxiety surrounding it. And, he was, it's his first adventure off on his own. And in our town, unlike Denise's, like, we did not have a lot of people, and still don't have a lot of people that do gap year. And he was getting feedback from friends that were excited to go to college and going off and thinking that he was doing something that was a little odd. And was there something, why was he doing it? There was like a lot of questions, like, well, why are you doing that? Why aren't you going to college? Like that kind of thing. So I think he had that a little bit hesitation, and which caused a little anxiety. And then just going off, on his own without his support system with him. And I remember dropping him at the airport and going to the gate with him. And my older son, when we dropped him off to college, I cried the entire way home because I knew it was the wrong college for him, and it was the wrong college for him. But I remember when I brought Gray to the airport and we were saying goodbye to him, I was smiling ear to ear. I was so excited for him. I just was thrilled for him. And he's like, I'm really nervous, but I know I want to do this. And so it was definitely a big leap for him. I had to have conversations. He did call a lot when he first got there. You're overtired, you're meeting new people. I got a bunch of phone calls, the time difference, I lost sleep for a couple days, but I think after maybe the second day he settled in, because you guys did a great job of keeping them really busy. So they felt very, in it right at the moment they got there. And that was a great distraction for him.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that it was a short-lived little bout of, normal anxiety. And,
Sorry,
I think
froze.
can you see me? Can you hear me? Did I freeze?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Well, I think I appreciate you sharing that, Susan. And I think it's important to help to normalize that, it's normal to feel a little
Yeah.
scared when you're about to take on something new. Mary, Denise, anything that you would add to that for the experience with Jasmine or Sora? Like, what was that initial experience like for them on program when they were sort of acclimating originally? Did you find that too helped with offsetting any nerves or anxiety initially?
I think when she was in the program, that first 3 weeks on the gap year program, they're going well, not 24/7, but they're going like a lot. And we actually were more desperate to get news and hear what was going on than she was like busy, like she was off socializing, doing her thing. And it wasn't until she really hit her first rotation that we started to get sort of the regular calls. So, there was no, from Jazz's perspective, there was, like, mom, dad, who are they? Like, I'm gone, right? So it was more us sort of like trying to track her and see where she was and stuff like that. Us missing her rather than her missing us. The homesickness surprised me. There is homesickness for sure. And in the gap year, with hindsight, it actually makes sense, but it kicked in around Thanksgiving. So, they're all still very much connected socially to all of their friends that are off doing their thing, whether that's freshman year, university or otherwise. And so, they weren't home for Thanksgiving, right? And so that's the sort of first time that they would normally be with their families, or they saw their friends with their families, or they would see their friends, right? And so for the gap year kids, that kicked in right at the end of November, and they didn't finish that program until the 20th of December. So I think those last few weeks of that first semester of gap year were tough for homesickness.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Sora was a little different. So she was on the 10-week program with the Changemaker, and they did also keep them very busy and on the go. And she landed, it was like, this is the best thing ever. I feel so mature. And she was on the go, and like there was really not much anxiety on the first bit. Similarly, as Susan, while I still did cry at the airport, it was like tears of pride and saying she's so courageous, and the fact that she's out there doing this, and then just meeting people from all over. That was another thing. And EF did. So what was unique about this program compared to some of the others is this a cohort of about 18 students that traveled together for the full 10 weeks. And so they did a really nice job with orientation, getting to know each other, and then actually going out as well. And she was on the go. We bought the extra insurance. We bought the additional phone plan, so that way she could call as much as possible and not have to worry about going over minutes. Because selfishly, I wanted the updates.
Yeah. So, and that's actually, you remind me of another question, Denise, of the whole process of just staying in touch with your children when they're on these programs. And, I know it sounds like you had a situation with the phone plan and everything like that. Susan, Mary, I know Mary, you were mentioning a little bit about this too, but anything to add around what was really helpful for just staying in touch with them with what was going on, or anything that would be helpful for our parents to hear?
Yeah, similar to Sora, Jazz had a separate Instagram for her gap year. So everybody that was interested in following along followed along there. So that was helpful, just so that I didn't have to keep answering questions of like, what's she doing? Where is she at? Go look at the Instagram, so that was good. And then, we didn't buy the phone program, but we had sort of something international that she'd used before in the past. So it was just regular phone calls or texting.
Great. Awesome. So I would love to ask a question. I know Denise, Emma, another one of our teammates, had mentioned that you really enjoyed your experience working with May. And I would love to explore a little bit on that. So for some context here, we have advisors that will be assigned to every student that's on one of our programs. And Denise had a really great experience with one of my coworkers, May. So I would love to hear a little bit about that from you, Denise, if you're comfortable with sharing.
Oh, Yeah, yeah. And it was funny because I asked Laura, I said, is there anything, I would be talking with other parents, is there anything you don't want me to say? She goes, no, just be totally honest. I was like, all right. So for Sora, it was about 5 weeks in. So they had gone to Costa Rica, they were in Panama, and there was a lot of freedom in Panama, and it was Carnival, and she had the time of her life, like just so much fun. And like even just today we were driving, she was saying, I miss those conversations because I met people, locals, and she's like, I miss my culture conversations. But anyway, so then they went to Dominican Republic and wasn't as safe there when they arrived in the capital. And I think it went all of a sudden, boom, it was 5 weeks in, and the country leader said, if you're going to leave where we are here, you need to tell me kind of where you're going. You couldn't go far. The freedom wasn't there, just out of safety, right? So Sora was upset about that. She called me and she was like, I don't know if I like this anymore, and I really miss home. And now she was watching all of her friends in their senior year doing all the fun, we're seniors, like at the back half of the year. So homesickness was really setting in. And she's like, Mom, I think I really want to come home. And it was like, I didn't want to say, but we paid so much. It was like the conversations that she and I were having is, why did you want to do this? Look at what's ahead. There's this point in time, but she for a while was like, no, I want to come home. So I called May and was like, May, this is what I'm hearing. I don't know what to do. I don't want to force it. And, she was just like, Denise, let me call her too. And Sora already had a good relationship with May, where she would let them know, this is what's happening in the program. We really liked this. We didn't like that, because it was the second round of change makers. So they already had that relationship. And so May and I just had open conversations, and then, she would talk with Sora, and then Sora said, okay, let me give it, a week, or it was like a few more days. And then May's like, okay, I'll check in. And then she would talk with me. Have you heard anything? It was like, we were really aligned and in a very transparent way with Sora. Sora knew we were talking, but you felt like you kind of had a partner in this, because, having her talk with Mom is one thing. And also hearing from an objective source where she trusted, and still to this day trusts May. I think that really helped. And I just so appreciated that, just knowing there was someone else there looking out for her. Open communication. She's fantastic.
She really is. I love May.
Yeah.
I just actually saw her a couple weeks ago. Great gal. And thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be highs and lows throughout these experiences, because that's life. That would be true if you were also going off to college, where you're going to have moments where are highs and lows too. I did.
Oh, I'll stop. But
No. Keep going. What?
And Sora now she's like, oh my God, it's a good thing I stayed, because I would have missed out on the rest of Dominican Republic, which now she wants to go back and volunteer at this boys center in Cabrete. And she talks about that being one of the most beautiful places. We're talking about the Galapagos Islands, and so she made it through, and you look at what she learned about herself, like persevering through that. And it's just those life lessons that they get on the program.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad that she decided to stay and that she continued on. Yeah, and that's why we have our advisors. And I think that's also something important to note, that they're not just there for our students, they're there for the whole family. And because, parents sometimes have situations where, they are struggling with their child not being around. And, it's helpful to have someone there that can kind of help to navigate some of those challenges. Now, I saw a couple of questions that popped into the chat that I want to touch on. One being asking a little bit about is there any downside to being a year behind for of friends that are going right to college? And then another question about the percentage of kids continuing on to college after a gap year with EF. I don't know the exact percentage of that, but I would say from my experience, what I typically find is that I would say like 8 out of 10 students that I work with usually have some sort of plan or some sort of idea of what they want to be doing afterwards. When it comes to a continuing education, sometimes that changes though after the program and they decide they want to do something totally different. But would you expand a little bit on, I know you, Mary, you were so kind to put in a response right in there. Anything that you would expand on there that you think would be helpful to know around that idea of, is my child going to be behind?
Yeah, Jazz had actually surprisingly quite a bit of anxiety about being behind being behind in college when she got back before she went on the gap year. And, of course, my husband and I have got lots of perspective and people go at all sorts of ages, but when they're in high school, you're just focused on the kids around you and the year that you're in, like they can't even think about the year below or the year above, right? And so we just talked her through it, and then the excitement and looking forward overcame any of that anxiety. And now, though, it's interesting because she actually was one of those kids, which I thought would happen, who completely changed her plans during gap year for after gap year, and I can talk about that in a minute. But and was only really, I think, able to do that because of the maturity that she gained on the gap year. But now with her choices, this isn't even a topic. She does recognize that she's going to be older, but more in a sort of positive way, like, oh, I'll be able to legally drink before everybody else can, sort of thing. But yeah, she definitely sort of thought about it, but now has kind of come through the other side and doesn't worry about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely coming into experiences with colleges and internships with a huge advantage in comparison to students that aren't doing programs like this, for sure. Susan, I want to ask you a couple of questions because I know it's been a while since Gray finished out his GAP program. I know some of for Mary and Denise, it was just a few months ago, but for you, Susan, and for Gray, it's been a while, and I'd love to hear kind of also answering this question a little bit from one of our parents, that whole aspect of when he got back from program and what he has been up to, and how you feel like his gap experience has sort of continued to impact him with what he's doing now.
Yeah. So when he came back from his gap year, we noticed, I mean, right away, just this sense of maturity that he gained, this sense of independence, this sense of really feeling more confident in himself. I think he met some really great kids on the program that enabled him to be a little bit more expressive, emotionally expressive, just idea expressive. So it gave him a really nice sense of confidence coming back from that. And he, unfortunately, when he came back, he went to school, to college, and the middle of his freshman year is when they all got sent home from COVID. So it's been a little bit of a tumultuous kind of path up to now, but he definitely has relied on his experiences from his EF gap year in so many different ways, from things that he's relationships that he formed during those gap years with peers that were different from him, that brought out a different side of him. And he sort of had an opportunity to come home and maybe reinvent himself a little bit. I think from his position when he is a student athlete and he's in this sort of pigeoned into this situation at in high school, it gave him the ability to sort of break out of that a little bit. Even the leadership program that you guys did at the end, he took notes in his phone during those times, and he still has those notes and refers back to some of the things that were spoken about during that leadership program. And he just went, he's gained a love of traveling, like he can't get enough of it. He has gone all over Europe now, going to soccer games and, going on his own, just booking a flight and going. And interestingly enough, he just went to Spain to go see some soccer, and he reached out to one of the EF tour guides that he had met and had a great relationship with, and that was just a great thing because he told them where to go and, said, hey, next time you're here, you got to let me know. And so it's just, he has really maintained those kinds of friendships that he made. And also really, I think, just developed a lot of confidence that's carried him through, getting through the COVID and transferring schools and working and all these different things. Definitely a nice sense of confidence that he gained on that program that I don't think he would have had he gone right from high school into college and done the 4 years and then out the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that he reached out to one of our tour directors.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
such a great
I know.
story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true, Susan. I'm so happy that to hear that you've felt that way with Gray, where I mean, even as adults, when we go and we travel places and we feel like, wow, I was able to get myself all the way to this
Yes.
place. Like it's a
Yes.
really cool thing to feel. And it does
Super
make you feel
empowering.
like you can do
Yeah.
anything. I felt that way even as an adult personally,
Right.
it's a cool thing to be able to feel. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, Mary Denise, I know it's been sort of recent since Jasmine and Sora have returned, but have you felt any of those changes or seen any of that growth that has made it feel like, wow, this was a really great thing for us that we decided to do?
Yeah, I mean, the personal maturity and growth, like even if you have a kid that you think is, you know, Jazz was one of those kids that as a little person could talk to adults, like, and everybody always was sort of quite, remarked about that. But it's the personal internal confidence about yourself, not necessarily you out in the world, but like your own internal voice, right? And that's what I saw the growth in. Almost like swung the other way. Like I'm like, wow, you're like super confident now. Like, let's not be overconfident. So but she had a lot of growth. I think the other thing that she had growth on that I certainly didn't expect, and I don't think she expected either, was that she had some really great perspective on friendships, because she did meet a lot of really great kids, and has lifelong friends from there. But it also made her reflect on her friendships that she'd had through high school, and whether they were quality friendships or what type of quality friendships they were. And it was sort of really interesting to see her journey through that, because when she came back at Christmas at the end of the first semester, she was really struggling with that, because she had met some really great kids and had, I think, Susan, you had said that maybe they had brought other elements out of Gray that, that perhaps he hadn't been able to explore because he was in the box that he was in high school. Similarly, I think Jazz had that same experience, and it really made her sort of think about her high school friendships and whether she valued some of them anymore. And part of that is like letting some of those go, which is difficult, right? And so she definitely went through what I'm going to call sort of almost like a grieving process over some friendships that she thought were good, and has now had the perspective and realized that they weren't that great. So that was like a huge growth thing that she had that she didn't expect, and I certainly didn't expect through that process. And that's, that was fantastic also.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that. Anything that you would add, Denise, to
I
that?
would see some similarities. And Sora, one day when we were talking about the program, she said, I learned more about myself than I ever thought I would. And when I started asking what more, she was just like, Mom, that's for me. But I see where, she's softened. Now, earlier, Mary, you were mentioning how the kids kind of see themselves in their world. It definitely expanded her purview and thinking about others. I feel like kind of softened. Yes, similar thing with friendships, where another thing she had said was, I became friends with people that maybe I normally wouldn't have outside of this program. So it's expanded her, as she thinks about going into college, about how she could be more open to others as well. But she came back. So this was the one thing, she was so kind of over high school. Mary, same thing, looked at some of those friendships and was like, are they really my friends? And just kind of came back and said, there's just kind of these focus views, so much to the point where she didn't, so this was hard for me. She didn't walk graduation. So
Really?
Yep, because she graduated, and you guys, everyone here will appreciate this, because it's just like, Sora, it's a milestone. She said, but Mom, I graduated in December. I'm like, yes, at the same time, walking across the stage, there's some significance to that. And it's this milestone, a way to really, seal it. And she said, I feel like I walked across the stage as I walked across 4 countries. It's like every
Oh.
country I walked across the stage, Mom. And I was like, all right, well said. Like, she looked at each of these experiences was her growth and her meeting these milestones. So I had to like shift that and be like, I am so damn proud of her, and that's hers, and it can't be about me, right? Wanting the pictures at graduation.
Yeah.
So we did get the cap and gown. The counselor's like, I'm going to give you guys the cap and gown so you can go take pictures by the Flatiron Mountains. So we'll get the pictures of her in the cap and gown. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I think that that's so powerful, she had this sort of walk as she was traveling. I mean, that's so inspiring. And I love that. I love that she decided to forego that. I think that's really cool. So we're coming up on time here, and I would love to just have one final question. I see a couple questions in the chat. I'll quickly type some answers out, but I would love to hear from each of you. If you were in the position that a lot of these parents are in right now, where they're trying to decide if this is what's best for their child's trying to decide if this is best for them, what piece of advice would you give to them to to be able to help them with navigating that right now, and kind of navigating that decision process? Any piece of advice that you would share? We'll maybe start with whoever feels inspired to answer first.
I think it has to be driven by them. It has to be their idea, their choice, and they need to do the work to get to the point of, scheduling the interview, or, all of that stuff. Because just like when they go off to university, like, you have to let it go. Like, it's not your journey, it's their journey, right? So as much as this gap year might sound super exciting to you, and actually that's the one consistent thing that anybody said to me when we were describing the program, the adults, when can I go on the gap year, right? They all wanted to go on the gap year, but it's not yours, it's theirs, and they have got to want it, really want it, and drive it.
Yeah, that's great advice. So true.
I will just chime in there, because I am a mom of boys. And so sometimes you have to really listen to the little breadcrumbs that they leave about wanting a change. And I don't think if I left it to Gray to schedule an interview with EF or anything, that it would have happened. So sometimes you just, I envy Mary's position because she has someone that will take that lead. But we had to really listen to the cues that Graydon. He did not come out like right out and say, I want to do a gap year. He said, I don't think I am ready to go to college right now, and I feel like there's something else out there I need to learn about or explore. So I took the initiative to throw things at him to see which ones sort of stuck. And then we sort of went from there. So I don't know, I think it's from a parental's perspective to really listen to the cues of the readiness and whether or not there might be another option out there.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah,
a
I like-
doubt, it has to be what they want, not what you want for them. Because
Mhm.
if you're pushing, I wouldn't do that, but it's what they want to do. And talk about the goals. What do you want to get out of a program like this? What are your aspirations? How do you see this fulfilling you? What are your values? And, those were some of the conversations we had, and it was pretty clear for Sora.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I so appreciate all of you coming out to our session today. And Mary, Denise, Susan, I really appreciate you taking the time to answer some of these questions. I know all three of you are really passionate about our programs, and I know that you have had experiences with your own children and going through these transformations. So thank you so much for sharing more about your stories and your experiences. And I know that everyone on this call, I'm sure, really appreciates this immensely. If you still have questions and they weren't able to be answered, just set up some time to chat with your GAP consultant, or like I had mentioned, we are hosting a informational webinar tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if that's something that you're interested in as well, feel free to join in and we'll go a little bit more in depth with our programs. But for now, thank you so much to everyone for being here. And we hope to see your children on one of our programs soon.
Good luck.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Bye.